We wait a bit more. Okay. Okay, so I think we will probably start now. So hi everyone, I'm Florian Gallier. I'm Strategic Partnerships Manager at Mo-Sys Engineering. And today I'll be talking about new ways to get more out of virtual production. So first, why do we use, in general, visual effects? And I think it's interesting to go back to that to understand how we use virtual production and why as well. So visual effects are used for scenes that are either too dangerous to film in, so environments that are too dangerous, too expensive, impractical, too time-consuming to film in, or even just impossible, or environments that don't exist at all. So that's why we are using visual effects, but the fact of using visual effects is not something new. I mean, if we go back in time, more than 100 years ago, visual effects were already used in movie. That's the example of Metropolis, for example, in 1927. They were using what we call the Shuftan process, and it was using a mirror to make a small set miniature look like giant and have the impressions and the illusions that the actors were acting in this set. That's how it was working. So it was just a mirror. You scratched a bit of the mirror, and then the camera can see through, but you also reflect the small miniature, and you have the illusions that you are in a huge set. So back in the day, that was a way to film in locations that were impossible to film in, or simply too expensive. For example, it was used in Metropolis, but also in blackmail, where they couldn't film in the British Museum, so they also had to use, Hitchcock had to use this process for the movie. Another example of creating virtual, background, not virtual yet, but background, is to use a painted backdrop. Here is a backdrop of the original backdrop of the Mount Rushmore for North by Northwest, again, Hitchcock. And that was another way to have virtual background when you couldn't film here, for example, on the Mount Rushmore. Matte painting also is a very known technique, and it was used a lot in many movies. I think the most famous one are this one, the one in Return of the Jedi, and Raiders of the Lost Ark for Indiana Jones. And it's interesting because we will see that there are some similarities with all these techniques and what we are using today and why we are using them. So here is an interesting example of matte painting. I think it was for the movie Blade Runner, which is interesting is that they needed to know exactly, obviously, where the painting on this glass was in relation to the camera. So if you look on the top left corner, you have the position of the painting and the angular position in regards to the camera. Another process, and then we'll finish that. So that's an example of the art of matte painting. Another process was rear projection, and the fact of filming something beforehand and then projecting it behind the actors. One of the most famous one is this one. So there you go. So we could say that's early virtual production. And then, so if we continue in our evolution of visual effects, we have in 1977, not the first time they used blue screen, but the first time blue screen was keyed out digitally. So it was in Empire Strikes Back. Again, we had no possibility to move the camera, so it was always static shots, and we had a virtual background, but with no movement of camera. In 2013, actually, we used LED panels and what we call LED cube for the movie Gravity. So Mo-Sys was involved in all the shots of Gravity with robotics. So I'll show you what it looks like, and then we can talk about it. So 2013, actually. So that's interesting because this was one of the first use of LED panels for movies, but it wasn't used to simulate a virtual backgrounds behind the actors. It was, so we used the Mo-Sys robotics to know exactly where the camera was in the space for to have the reflection only on the faces of the actors. And then everything was written in post-production afterwards. It was only for the reflection and not to use it as a virtual background like we do now, today. Yes, and now things are a bit more easier and it's much more accessible to do virtual production because you don't need such advanced robotics to do so. You just need to combine camera tracking and easy to use camera tracking and software like game engine, like Unreal, for example. And with the power of Unreal or any game engine and the camera tracking, which is easy to use, by combining both, virtual production is much more now accessible to everyone, and it's much more easier to use and to create with. So I'm going to talk a bit about camera tracking and how it works. So that's the star tracker. I'll show you a video of how it works, actually. So you can see here there are, on the ceiling of the studio, little stars. It's a constellation of stickers, and we call them stars, actually. And the star tracker looks at these stars permanently. So at whole time, we know exactly, thanks to these stickers, where the camera is in the space. Which means that when I move my camera, I can tell the game engine in which the 3D scene and the 3D environment is created exactly where the camera is in the space. And thanks to that, when I move my camera in the real world, we also have the parallax effects in the virtual world. Added to that, we also need lens distortion. It's very important because obviously every lens has its own distortion. So we need to be able to also distort the graphics the same as the real lens to give the illusion that everything is within the same world. So then camera tracking allows you to film within a 3D world in real time. So there's different ways to use virtual production and camera tracking. One good example is with green screen, for example. So that's actually an early use of virtual production with green screen and Unreal and camera tracking in real time. Or more recently, it's been used more and more with LED wall. So to continue our evolution of, let's say, visual effects up to virtual production, in 2017, the company AR Wall, which is a boutique company in LA, started to do one of the first demo of real-time use of LED wall. And that's what it looks like in 2017. It was the early stage of LED walls. And then 2019, the Mandalorian. So that's really when it became more popular and people who didn't know about LED wall just started to learn about this, this technology and how to use it. And that's also when big volumes became much more trendy and a lot of volumes were created. Again, in Mandalorian, they had to use volume because of this very specific armor that the Mandalorian, that the actor is wearing, like this silver reflective armor. So you needed a big volume to have this reflection. So again, it's for the reflection, which is interesting because it was the same need as for gravity, for example, in 2013. And then with Mandalorian and all this production, it was a rise of LED volumes. So big volumes in which you can be in this virtual world and film in the real world. But with all this new way of filming, we need to be able to do what we do on set, on locations, because you want to be able to do what you are the best at your job on location, but be able to do the same in the virtual world and with green screen or LED walls, right? So that's why we came up, with this philosophy that we call cinematic XR, which is creating tools that are cinematic for virtual production. So one of the first, I would say, issue with the LED wall is the focus, because if we think about it, it's just a giant screen. So once we are focusing on the foreground, that's very easy. We can do that with remote controller, and we can control the lens, and we can use that for storytelling, and that's very important for storytelling, obviously, to be able to pull focus. But then if you want to focus behind the wall, you need a solution because the wall is just screen. So we come up with ways to be able to do the focus in the real world and in the virtual world. So once we reach the wall, we stay sharp on the wall, and we will focus within the virtual world. But it's all done seamlessly with no transition. And the focus puller never realize that they have to adapt to this virtual world. It's the same regardless of where they are focusing. So I think there's another video that actually shows what it looks like. And here it is. So here again, the actress is in front of the wall, and this forest is all generated in 3D in the software Unreal. And now we can focus on the deer. And then, as you can see as well, since we know the position of the camera in the space, and we also have data on the lens, when I'm moving away from the wall, it will automatically adjust the focus as well, because we have all this data, and we can do that automatically. And then again, we can see what it looks like. So the focus, the real focus, and the virtual focus are controlled simultaneously. And once I reach the wall, in terms of focus, when I'm sharp on the wall, I block the real focus, and the virtual focus takes over. And then if I come back in the foreground, obviously, the real focus will take over. So that's one of the tools that we created for LED wall and virtual production. Added to that, we also created what we call near-term rendering, and that's a way to be able to have two workflows. So one workflow is dedicated to speed and to be able to be consistent and to film consistently at 25 frames per second. And to do so, we will reduce a bit the quality of the scene by removing a bit of reflection, a bit of shadows or refraction, but we are able to film very smoothly and in real time in the 3D world. So you have this workflow, and in parallel, we have another workflow which is dedicated to performance and to, not to performance, so to quality, and to be able to deliver something in high resolution. So when I'm filming, I'm also sending all the tracking data, all the lens data, and every data that we have in the cloud, and it's automatically re-rendering the scene in very high quality. So let's say that we are filming on a shoot on a Monday, for example. We will have all the scene in real time, and we can film in real time in this 3D world. But on the Tuesday morning, I will have everything re-rendered with the actors in front of it in very high quality, 4K or 8K. Now another issue of the LED walls is the size of the wall, obviously. So if you pan too far to the left or the right, or if you tilt up or down too far, then obviously you will reach the limit of the wall, because they have limits, right? So what we can do is what we call set extension. So we will extend the 3D world that is on the wall, but in 3D. And it gives the illusion that this 3D world never ends. And we can also add AR elements in front of the actors to give the illusion that there's more in the space. So let's have a look at what it looks like. So here you can see an example, and then we remove now the set extension. So you see pretty much the size of the wall and what it looks like, and you can see that now we put them back. So it's not an issue to have smaller walls, because we can extend them with 3D graphics. And it's all obviously done in real time thanks to the tracking as well, and the lens distortion. So it's with and without AR graphics. So as we can see, there's been an evolution of visual effects up to what we call now virtual production and the volumes. And that's why, and then with the tracking and game engine combined, it was much more easier to use and much more interesting. But we had to create tools to be able to be cinematic within this virtual production space and be able to do to be very creative. But again, why do we use virtual production, in fact? Because I think there are two ways of using virtual production. One is for very high budget filming, for scenes that are impossible to film. For example, Mandalorian, you had to film on another planet, you had a shiny reflective armor, so you needed that. or scenes that are impractical. If you have the budget to close some street of a city to shoot in a car, it's going to be very impractical, so why not do it in studio? And that's why big budget movies are using virtual production. But now also, smaller budget, mid to low budget could use virtual production much more and could get a lot of benefits from it. Because you can film with the same budgets and be able to film much more. You can have much more scenes, you can film in much more locations, and you can even film in location you didn't think you could be able to film in, depending on what the budget of your movie is, by reducing the cost of filming in location, but also having much more efficiency. But to do so, we need to be able to have a workflow that is also adapted, of course, to this type of production. And that's what we call the hybrid virtual production workflow. So it's a combination of green screen and smaller LED walls. So when are we going to use the green screen? Well, you will use the green screen for your wide shots. So the actors will be on the green, and you can do your wide shots, so it's the establishing shots, and you can see the feet, and you can see the shadows, and you don't need to change the floor all the time like you will do in a volume, for example, because it also takes time and resources. So yeah, we could just, so that's an example of a short movie that was filmed earlier this year, when the actress was here on green screen, and that was for all the wide shots. That was for all the wide shots. And obviously you can also move in the scene as much as you want thanks to the tracking. And here you have the floor and the shadows and the reflection and everything you will want for a wide establishing shot. But now we're done with the green screen. We're done with the wide shot, and she's walking to the LED wall, which is a much smaller LED wall than volumes, because we're ready now and we had time to prepare the LED wall for the close-up and the mid-shot. And then we go to the LED wall. And then we can use the LED wall for all the advantages of the LED wall without the need of using a huge volume for this type of production. And you will still have what's interesting with an LED wall, which is the reflections, so all the reflections on the clothes, on the glasses, on the skin, but also some nice close-up and mid-shots that are very dramatic. So by combining both, then it's interesting. And in the meantime, we can prepare the green screen for another scene, another wide shot. So this has some footage of a short movie that was completely filmed with this workflow that will be released soon. So that's what we call hybrid virtual production. It's a way to film more for the same budget and be able to film more scenes, be much more efficient, and be able to use virtual production for this type of production. So as we saw, this virtual production evolved over the years, and visual effects is definitely not something new. We just reached a stage where we can use virtual production for different type of production, for big production, where they need to film in a gigantic space with scenes that don't exist, or smaller productions that will also have advantages to use virtual production. So thank you very much, and now I'm ready to answer any question. Thank you. Can you still hear me? Yeah. Okay. All right. Oh, I think we've
got someone in front.
Two.
Sorry.
Should we? Maybe you want the mic
Yeah.
to? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
We'll come back. We'll
Sorry.
come back. Okay.
Hi.
Yeah,
What's the
okay.
calibration process for the Star Tracker camera tracking? Is it a one-off process, or does it need to be done once and then?
Yeah, that's kind of the concept. So it's quite easy actually. You're just gonna stick stickers on the ceiling of your studio, and that creates a unique map. So all the stickers are put randomly, so every map of studio is unique. And then you just walk around with the tracker once, and you created this map. So you have a file for this map, and then that's pretty much it. And then the star tracker will work, and then you keep the map. If you extend your studio, you can add more stickers, but you don't need to recreate this map every time. It's just once, and that's done forever.
And lighting systems, if something gets in the way, if a rig gets in the way, obviously.
Yeah, that's usually not an issue. Like you don't need to have all the stars. I mean, we call them stars, but they're stickers. You don't need to have them all together. It can be like, I think it can track down to something like 5 stars or something like that. So it's not a problem, definitely. And then even if you have a big lighting in it, it's infrared, so it's not a problem either. You can switch off the lights, so that's pretty robust. Thanks. Yes, I think there was a question here.
Another microphone. Hello.
Okay. Hello.
I'm interested in your the set extension and foreground augment, and the example you showed was with static geometry, and I just wondered. I've got a particular production and experimentation in mind. What if the foreground augment was animated and needed to be triggered on a particular moment within the tracking, and similar to the background set extension? I mean, what we're trying to do is having not just environments, but virtual characters as part of the virtual world, as it were, which are sort of alive. Is that something that is possible? Have you done it? Is it shown anywhere?
Definitely. So that's also, the more we evolve towards, I would say, virtual production 3.0, it's to have less difference between the real world and the virtual world. So, for example, you know that, for example, in Unreal, you have what you call meta-humans, which are like 3D characters, or very realistic humans, but in 3D. And they are, yeah, but they are interesting, for example, for if they are super far away, for extras, for example. If you don't have the budget to hire so many extras for a small production, then they could be very far away and out of focus, and that will be interesting to have a bit of animation in your background as well. And now for the foreground, if you want something to happen in real time and being triggered by your camera movement, is definitely doable, because you know exactly what's your position in the space. So you can also say you can tell the game engine where is your camera and where you want to trigger something. So that will definitely be doable, yeah.
And in terms of like, it's sort of allied to your focus throw trick, because sure, for background characters, crowd characters, out of focus, blah, whatever. Mm-hmm. But foreground characters that actually behave autonomously, which can be triggered with Unreal, obviously. But they would need to be, in this case, I mean, imagine you as an actor are having a conversation with your uncle's ghost. Mm-hmm. And your uncle's ghost appears in foreground in a Danish castle. You probably know what I'm referring to. So that scene would need mid-ground augmented virtual character, expression, mm-hmm. automated expression, focus, because we'd want to change the camera angle. So there'd be a few different things going on. I'm wondering where it would break. I mean, I'm sure it would first time, but...
But yeah, exactly. So that's exactly why we also created, as you said, like the focus, the cinematic XR focus. So everything is done seamlessly, because everything is also handled in Unreal. So the AR graphics that you have in front of the wall, but also what is inside the wall, which is actually just the same 3D scenes just being projected in real time on the wall. So for the game engine, there's no difference, and everything is done digitally, and we are the bridge between the real world and the virtual world. So it's definitely for this kind of use case that it's interesting, because everything is done seamlessly. And yeah, so that will work, yeah, definitely.
Okay, you're on.
Should chat after. Thank you. I think there was a question here. Here after.
Hi, so I'm Christopher. Also, yeah, hi. I'm currently shooting a short film where we're using artificial intelligence to create our 3D backgrounds.
Okay.
And one of the things we're struggling with is camera tracking with our Alexa and translating that into the virtual workspace. So I wondered if you have any advice on that.
In what way? I didn't really get the question, sorry.
So we're currently using an Oculus Rift setup attached to Ari to manipulate the camera in the 3D space, but we're struggling to find a workflow that works.
Okay, well, we can talk after to see maybe if we can help you.
Cool.
I'm sure we can. Thank you. I think there was a question here and then here after.
Okay.
Hi.
How are you? How many people do you think from Mo-Sys it's needed just to be efficient on set? Like, do you think like in a minimum amount of Mo-Sys crew on set to be efficient, or what's your opinion on that?
So do you mean how many technicians do you need?
Yeah, I
set?
don't know if it's needed like a proper Mo-Sys crew technician just to be able to do that production, or?
Well, actually, the idea is more for us to, so it's usually studios who are being equipped by this technology, and the idea is to train studio operators to empower them and that they are able afterwards to do their own production. And technically they only need us for support if needed, but they are able to film once they are trained and they can do their first project on their own, really. They're able to operate the systems themselves, really. So, yeah, for very specific projects we are here as well, but otherwise, once you're trained, you should be able to use it on your own as a cinematographer or any.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think there was a question here as well. Yeah.
That's great, thanks. Sorry? Oh, standing up. Oh, God, okay. Hi. I'm curious about two things, actually. One is the focus throw, when you you've got your subject in the foreground and then you focus through to the LED wall, and then in theory your focus can keep going. We're just testing on LEDs at the moment, and I thought we're not meant to focus on the LED panel because of moire issues, pixel pitch, these sort of things. That's my first question.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. So you don't want to be, and that's also when it's also interesting to use, you don't want to be super sharp on the wall for the moire effect and all these other effects. So you want to be just sharp to be able to not have the moire effects, and that's also something you can program with the tracking, so you know exactly where you will be sharp enough to not have the moire effect, if that makes sense.
Okay, so that makes perfect sense. And then the other question was on the scene extensions. I'm just curious about the workflow with the scene extensions, because I'm assuming you're going to end up with two plates. One is what you're getting with the LED behind that you're capturing in camera, and then the other extension plate that's generated in Unreal Engine. I'm assuming you just combine those using timecode and create a junk mask or something around it.
So it's all handled in real time because everything is synchronized. So you synchronize the camera, you genlock it, and then you synchronize also the game engine, Unreal, and the wall. So everything is synchronized together, so you know exactly how to match it, and it's done automatically. And that's pretty much it, really. And then obviously to make the AR match with the wall, you play around with tools to tweak the colors as well, obviously to be able to have the best set extension. But all that is done with the plugin in the game engine. Basically. That makes sense.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I think that's it. I have a signal. So, yeah, I hope it was interesting, and thanks for coming today. Thank you. Thanks.